Well, all eyes will be on the Reserve Bank today as it decides whether or not to lift interest rates and heap more pain on mortgage holders. The financial strains of cost of living and housing are biting hard. So, how is this constant uncertainty translating with voters? And are they angry with politicians? For more on this, we're joined by Redbridge Group Director Simon Welsh. Simon, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about this. We know that cost of living, it's been an issue now for Australia for at least the last 12 months. Who are voters blaming?
Yeah, thanks, Tanaka. Yeah, the worm has really started to turn on this I think, really only in the last few weeks. So what we've seen is, you kind of expect when financial strain, financial stress comes into the system, you kind of expect people to become a bit more in shock, a bit more concerned with their own issues, a bit more sort of, concerned with their own plight. And what we're seeing is, sure, that's happening, but there's this real sense of kind of punching up. So there's this real sense that the political class, the political world is just disconnected from these problems. There's no sense that any politician has kind of got their finger on the pulse, on the strain, on the hurt, on the stress that's happening in Australian households right now. So there's this real sense of kind of punching up that this entire political class is kind of disconnected. And what folk are saying to us is, this is the same crisis. This is the same crisis that we've been living with through the past 3 years. This is just an extension. The causes of this go back to COVID. It's all kind of linked into this same crisis. And we're seeing a political class that's gone back to politics as usual. It's gone back to the game of politics. It's got the wrong priorities. They're not talking and doing enough on cost of living, on cost of housing, these sorts of things. At best, they're doing stuff, but they're doing the wrong stuff. So that could be, too much focus on international relations, these sorts of things. Or it could be that they are distracted by their own bad behaviour, their appalling behaviour. So folk are talking about the sort of the Brittany Higgins type issues and the other sort of assault harassment issues in Parliament. So we've got this political class that's distracted, or at least not focused on the right things. And so there's this real growing sense of angst. The interesting thing is that you always kind of get a bit of cynicism in Australia, healthy cynicism. But what we're seeing here is this cuts across everyone. It cuts across. It doesn't matter whether you're a Labor voter, a Liberal voter, or a Greens voter. It's there. It doesn't matter whether you're highly engaged or not very much engaged at all in politics. Even the folk for whom politics is usually pretty invisible are really angry about this disconnection that's happening right now.
Oh, that's really interesting that it's impacting every single group and every single type of voter out there. How much has it got to do with the messaging? Because every day we hear the same thing from politicians from all sides of, if there's a cost of living crisis, everyone's doing it tough out there, we're in hard times. Are those messages not translating?
I think it's a question of contrasts. So what we still hear in focus groups is COVID showed what politicians, what political parties, what governments could do when they really wanted to do something. They could, turn the country around. They could lock the country down when they really wanted to do something. They're not seeing that same action. There might be a bit of talk. Even some of the talk just doesn't cut through. There might be a bit of talk around it, but where's the big, bold action that reflects the depth and the degree of the stress and the crisis that we're experiencing right now? So I think that there's sort of a contrast here, and this links back to this idea. It's the same crisis. This is just an extension of the same thing that we've been going through for the last 3 years. So where's the big response to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many other issues around at the moment. What does this anger that you've been referring to, what does it mean for other matters? For example, the voice to Parliament.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So voice is becoming a bit of seen as a political issue, and even a party political issue, with both sides taking off, and that's really dangerous. For as long as it's seen as Anthony Albanese's voice or the Labor government's voice initiative, which is sort of the bag that it's drifting into, as opposed to an issue of human rights, social justice, those sorts of things, it falls foul of this kind of anxiety, this kind of angst that's out there at the moment. So it's seen as, here's another thing that governments are really focusing on when actually, you could do that, but you have to be absolutely doing this cost of living and housing stuff first. This is what the groups are saying to us. You've got to get that stuff sorted out first, then let's have a conversation about voice. So unless you can transition voice into a apolitical, sort of a non, it's above politics, then it's going to run foul of that kind of sentiment. And I think that's probably what we're seeing in some of the polling that's out.
Well, as we just said, leading up to speaking with you, support for the voice to Parliament has slumped once again, according to a new poll. Again, does it come down to messaging? Because there's so much information out there. Is it almost overwhelming voters?
I think, I don't think, certainly from what we're seeing in the focus groups, is the simple no-brainer argument for the voice hasn't been articulated yet. I think, when we look at sort of what resonates in the focus groups, I think Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews probably has made the strongest case for it, where he talked about, obviously, best intent, but things haven't worked in the past. The only way we can make them work is to give Indigenous people a say. That very simple idea at the core of the voice is the idea that still a lot of voters haven't grasped, they haven't received that message. They've got a lot of message about we need to do this thing because it's right, which a lot of them agree with. But there's still, but why this? Why now? Why this particular idea? I still think there's a knowledge gap there that needs to be addressed, based on what we're seeing in the focus groups.
Yeah, and it just feels like the campaign's only really just started. So it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and when that poll eventuates. Simon Welsh, good to speak with you. Thanks for joining us.